Of the one of 10.
We're on 9, number 9. Want to invite Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings.
Morning, or good afternoon, board members. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy here at USBE. And I also have with me Jeff Van Holten. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Jeff Van Holten, Director of Public Affairs.
And
And we're going over statutory changes.
Correct. And we've got them posted or showing on the screen up there. They've been uploaded to Civic Clerk. So I will go through and discuss first the policy requests only, and then you'll see that we're doing something a little different today that we haven't done in the past. I'll explain that in a moment, but we've also added policy requests that are included with business cases, or they are attached to or related to funding requests. So first we'll talk about just the policy requests only. Just as a reminder, these are requests by staff and others for us to get the green light from you all to ask a legislator to open a bill file on these topics. So the first one is about providing the authority to change statute to allow the audit committee to perform some of the functions that right now statutorily only the board can do. Things such as hiring your chief audit executive. In this case, it would be Debbie Davis or her replacement at some point. Currently, the state board is the only one who legally has the authority to take some of those actions. It would allow the audit committee to take some actions without it being a recommendation that then comes to the full board. So there's more information in the backup. Does anybody have any questions about that? Or Chair, would you like me to just go through all 4 and then pause for questions? What would you prefer?
Let's do one at a time, see if there's some questions, and then go to the next. Because I believe the motion, if all 4 of them are, it would be as proposed. So that's one. So Board Member Hanson?
Yeah, just a question as to, have there been specific instances where this has been cumbersome? I mean, hiring doesn't happen very often, evaluations happen once a year. Are there specifics that we should be aware of that maybe we're trying to streamline?
And Chair,
Yes, please
Huntsman.
respond.
And I would probably defer maybe to Vice Chair Belknap as Chair of the Audit Committee, or if Debbie Davis, Chief Audit Executive, is available. I think it's just part of that. Do you want the full board doing the evaluation, hiring, et cetera, or having the Audit Committee perform that function? So.
Vice Chair Davis, who chairs, or not Davis, Belknap, who chairs the audit committee. Can you add some clarity?
I think I can address this a little bit, Scott and everyone, in the fact that it is cumbersome to always have to keep bringing different pieces back to the full board, because sometimes hiring a new person by that point, we're months without somebody to lead us. And also, I think maybe we could do something along the lines of not a ramification, what is it? Ratify, thank you. Yeah, something along those lines. The other thing is in other auditing areas in other state entities, they don't require a full board of any type to do that. So I don't know if Debbie has something else.
Your mic. Hang on one sec. Is it? There it is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still looking for specifics. I mean, other than hiring, which happens very infrequently. Just, are there specific instances that we're trying to streamline the process, or I'm not seeing the need to make a big change here?
What if I come back to you on that?
Okay.
Yeah, we can come back to this one too, as you're get with Debbie also.
Great. Chair, would you like me to go on to number 2?
Oh, hang on one sec.
no.
Let me, okay, we're good. Board Member Lear,
I'm
She
trying
didn't
to
push
be-
her button yet.
I'm trying to be me and Jen.
we need your button.
I just need you to push it.
Still not pushed. Well, it's not
I'm
showing.
Janet, now I'm Janet. That's why I'm trying to undo Janet and be me.
Oh, but I don't see Janet either.
Oh, because I logged Janet out, but then when I tried to log me in, all this explanation.
Brent, will you push your button and let her speak into your mic?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And
Member
maybe we
Lear.
can figure this out, somebody smarter than us. I'm a little concerned with the idea that a committee of the board appoints one of the board's employees. Not that I don't trust the audit committee, but it's still a committee of the board, and I don't know that the idea that the rest of the board just confirms that is something I'm comfortable with. It doesn't seem to me like we've had huge waiting periods for confirmation from the board. So I would prefer the board hiring the employee and not a committee of the board. Thanks.
Chair?
Angie?
Jeff Van Holten would like to provide some
Okay.
additional information
Jeff,
that
can
might
you
help.
give some insight?
Yes, thank you. Jeff Van Holten, Director of Public Affairs. One thing to keep in mind is what the current statute states, which is right now, the way that it is worded, the audit committee is the only one allowed to hire and evaluate the chief executive auditor for the board. And this change would allow the board to now have that power if they so choose, or delegate it back to the way that the code currently reads. Previously, you had been doing it as a board, but that violated statute because of the way that it's worded and how some of the definitions played out in code. So this would just give the board flexibility to keep doing it the way that code currently requires you to do it, or to take on that power.
Yeah, follow up.
Yeah, I think we've got.
Me in the right place.
There we go.
Was it follow-up to me? Did you direct that to me? I feel better about that. I'm okay with the ability to do it, changing the code so that we have the ability to do that, but I don't want to make it the only way we can do it. Yeah, somehow we've been violating the code for like 5 or 8 years, and nobody has invalidated the actions of the audit committee, so.
The difference is, we didn't, we weren't aware of our noncompliance to the code, and as soon as we were made aware, we came into compliance. The question, the opportunity before us as we move forward is to go back to where we were, or have that statute change to better serve the board.
I'm fine.
That's the opportunity. Correct?
Yes, I apologize. I totally did the opposite, spoke to it the opposite, and
Yeah.
I apologize.
So as many of you aware, yeah. Okay, so and thank you, and I'm in favor of bringing that back because of the headache that it was, or the challenges that we've had in the past. So we can see if we can clean that up. So please continue on to the next.
Thank you. Hopefully I will get number 2 correct. So number 2, as you may know, in spring of 2020, the state, we did not have our spring assessments. Due to that, we have a program that provides bonuses for teachers who teach in high-poverty schools and have a certain growth score, either an MGP or they have a certain score on the Acadians benchmark that demonstrates that they are highly effective educators. And the point of this program is to attract highly effective educators to our high-poverty schools. And then there's this possibility for this approximately $7,000 bonus. What happens is because the bonus, the eligible educators who qualify for this bonus, their eligibility is determined based on measuring have assessments during spring of 2020, we had to come up with, or we need to come up with, a different way of designating their eligibility. And so that occurred this last session. There was a bill passed, and unfortunately at that time, we we have the wrong years in statute. They need to be moved up 1 year from 2021 to 21-22, and then the 21-22 to 22-23. So what this recommendation is to do two things. It's to fix the years so that we can ensure that next year, when we have our payments next year, or actually it's this spring, so I guess it is next year, spring of 2022, that the teachers will be able to receive payments and we won't have a lag like we did last year where these bonus payments weren't able to go out because of the assessment. The second thing is it would also, oh, yes.
Oh, please continue.
The second thing is it would clarify the eligible teacher. It would prorate the amount of the bonus to the amount that the teacher is actually teaching students in the classroom versus maybe somebody who might be a part-time administrator and part-time teaching. It's this idea, it's similar to what we do with the TSSP, where let's say you're a special education teacher for half the day, but then you are a district employee for the other half of the day. TSSP teachers receive half of that stipend. We recommend doing the same thing for these bonuses because we had an instance, for example, where one teacher was only teaching 1/8 of the day in the applicable population, and the other 7/8 was an instructional coach or, a district, an administrator. And it seems to make sense to make sure and prorate that because really the purpose of this bonus is to have effective teachers in the classroom with our students. So that would be the second clarification in code, is to just, we'd use almost identical language that we have in code for the TSSP stipend that just states that the amount of the bonus will be based on the number of hours that that person is teaching in the classroom. So that's the second part of it.
And let me see if there's any questions. Seeing none, please continue.
The third one is simply a request to ask, I'm guessing Representative Pulsifer, to open a bill file to have ready in case, and hopefully we will have some recommendations for either streamlining reports or repealing reports as a result of the work that we'll be doing related to HB 300 last year, which requires us to review reports. We've got approximately 96 to 100 legislative reports that we'll be reviewing and making recommendations on. So it would be to make sure there's a bill file open to do that work once the board has been able to hear the results of some of the work we'll be doing. We should have something for you by January that then we can make a recommendation to the legislature on.
Any questions? Please continue.
The fourth one was provided to us or given to us by Brian Garrett, who works with the State Department of Military and Veteran Affairs. The recommendation is that our students who come from military families often move in later in the date for open enrollment. Many of you may know that when students want to enroll in a district school that's outside of their district, the boundary where they live in, that starts as early as February before the fall of the next school year. And oftentimes our students who come from military families don't move into the state until after those dates. The Department of Military and Veteran Affairs is requesting support from USBE. They would like to request that military students receive preference when it comes to being able to participate in open enrollment, similar to what I think also occurs with charter school preferences as well. So that's the request that was brought to us by our colleagues from the State Department of Military or Veterans Affairs.
Okay, we have a couple board members with some questions. Member Hanson?
Yeah, just a question as to how this might play out. So around Hill Air Force Base especially, there'd be lots of military families coming in. Would this effectively push families who live in the area, out of the running for open enrollment? Because if preference is given just to military families, there might be no chance at all for them to get in. And second question, I guess, is there a way that we could just pool these requests somehow to a certain date and then deal with them all on this unequal footing? I'm all for preference for military families, but in that area, it could effectively put some people out of the open enrollment market entirely.
Yeah.
Those are great questions, Board Member Hanson, in the sense that it's hard to know how it would impact, but just to give kind of an example of how this might work. Let's say that a military family moves into the Weber School District, but they would like to attend a certain Ogden School District school versus staying within the Weber School District. So currently, those time periods start as early as February, and I know that Board Member Davis might have some thoughts on how it's important to know early on which students are coming into those schools, especially when they're coming outside of your boundaries. They generally have enrollment periods of like February and then a spring, and then sometimes if they have slots open, which sometimes they do, they allow entrance as late as August. And so that you proposing something that's a little different, which would be to move those later. What I heard from the email that I read from Brian Garrett is sometimes those military families aren't coming in until summer. So the question is, how would that impact the whole system if those deadlines are later? Again, it's about family planning as well. So I just wanted to throw out some of those other considerations.
Could I follow
Yeah,
up?
follow up.
Chair? So I think you went to the second question that I had, but the first question is, would this, if military families are given priority, would that effectively put other families who are seeking the same kind of exemption, would that bump them from slots that have already been awarded? Would that effectively push them maybe out of the, a bit, they wouldn't have the ability to do that?
So if they all applied at the same time, the military students would have preference. I think to your question is, what if in February, 10 students are granted open enrollment, and that's all that was allowed, and then later, military students ask maybe in June or August? That's what you're asking, okay? Okay.
Ben?
Add to that. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. The way we do it with the preference for charter schools is we allow the charter schools discretion whether they give those families preference. So they would be able to adopt the policies, and then they can make those judgment calls looking at the applications they receive. And I think that's kind of what we're suggesting here. So it would be the LEAs to have discretion where they would give that preference.
I understand that. Not helpful for me, though, to have them making a decision based on what criteria. I mean, we've said a military family should get preference if we pass this, and then they come in and then they have discretion to not give them preference. It sounds like a kind of a mess if we just adopt it the way that it's been explained to me, as far as parents who are already in the system and potentially getting bumped. I mean, I don't know if there could be slots reserved for military families so that they could get in late, or if there's another way to approach this. But in an area with a high military concentration, I think this could negatively impact kids from non-military families.
Yeah, please respond.
I think you are raising a lot of issues that would have to be discussed and determined in the legislation. I don't know that the Department of Military and Veteran Affairs have gotten to that point of saying, what are those details? With our charter school preferences, for example, the charter schools are not required to provide preferences, but they are allowed to. And so I think that's what Ben was speaking to, is that it could be that we're simply providing districts the allowability to provide preference. Another example of a preference that sometimes districts provide and sometimes they don't is I've heard that they can give preference to children of teachers, for example. So a teacher who teaches in Weber but lives in Ogden, some districts do allow preferences for students of employees, not just teachers, to have a preference for open enrollment, because you can see where maybe the teacher wants to have their students being educated in the same district they are attending. So we don't have the details yet. I would say I'm guessing our colleagues that support, and you all support families with of students who are in the military. I don't mean to say that you're not, but I think that they would be happy with whatever the board would support. So if the board only wanted to support a certain aspect of it, and maybe what we could do is bring this back again next month and kind of think through some of the issues you raised and ask them what they're thinking. But I think at this point, it would be allowing LEAs to provide a preference at their choice, not make it mandatory. And maybe it could be something in there that says they can only provide a preference when there's open spots available at the time of enrolling. We could kind of think through some
And this is
language.
for open enrollment, so,
Yeah,
so it would only be if they're open.
correct. But there are sometimes where the open enrollment has different phases. It's not always known right in February how many.
Yeah, just one.
Okay, we've got a few other board members
Oh, I'm
with
sorry.
questions, and
Okay.
I'll get in the queue after they're done. Board Member Hart?
So I deal with this every year because my school has more applications than we can fill. So the open enrollment window closes in February, and then you have to act on those. I'm wondering if, I'm clarifying what they're asking. Are they, and then after that, you're under no obligation to offer a space available permit. Are they simply asking to extend the open enrollment window if it's already been closed, and it would be not an, it would be a provisional permit or enrollment? Are they asking to just simply extend the opportunity for a permit, or are they truly asking to go to the top of the list whenever they get to the state?
Ben?
Thank you. So if you look in the statute there, the statute says that schools are supposed to have the early enrollment windows that you're talking about. There's also a late enrollment window that the
Right.
statute says they should have. And so as I understand it, they're anticipating that most of their applications will come in that late enrollment window, and they are requesting that LEAs have the authority to have a policy to give them a preference in that late enrollment window.
Okay, thank you. And
With the keyword allow, we allow them, if they choose to, give a preference. And I believe that's what I'm hearing from on the veteran, all of that side, that either we're going to be engaged in it now or we'll be engaged in it later, because they would like to have this resolved, but they haven't got legislators lined up to resolve this. So it's kind of in our court right now. If we act and we're on the front end of it, I believe that if we don't act and we're not on the front end of it, that on the military community will get advocacy, and they'll still go to the legislature, and we'll see a bill, but because that's kind of how it happens. So we either can be on the front end of it or we're on the reactive side of it. That's how I see it. But it's about an allowable, so an LEA could choose to give a preference, which means a local board has got to get engaged in it. We're not forcing it. You have a follow-up, Molly?
I do. It's actually, it might just be a point of order. So if we're going to take a vote on this, it's an action item?
This is to start on the pathway.
That's what I'm.
This is not the end.
So it
game.
would bring the rule to the board for discussion, not necessarily,
The
is that correct?
statute.
Oh,
It'll
the
be about
statute.
amending the statute.
Okay,
So there's more to follow. So this is to get it started.
so we could make
All of
other,
these are to get started.
so we could make other amendments to that rule as well?
Oh,
Okay.
proposed amendment, yeah, to the statute, yes. Board Member Earl?
Yes, I'm all for helping our military families. So however we can do that and do it in a way that's, not going to compromise other things going on. My question is, do we know how many children this actually impacts in our state? And maybe specifically, it does impact the area up where I'm at. So I'm just wondering if we know numbers.
I don't think we have specific numbers at this point. They just have received some concerns from national groups that are looking at specific issues that they want states to enact. And so that's what they're following up on.
I wonder if we could get a couple of past years, just so we had an estimation of what we're looking at around the state. They probably have that,
I can certainly look into it.
yeah. yeah, just so we know impact, and that would maybe help inform our moving forward. So thank you.
Okay. Member Lear?
I think this is getting more complicated. We've seen a lot of these requests for military families, but this is an example of one that is getting more complicated because I'm concerned, is it just literally a space in the school, or what about an opportunity for the gifted and talented program, or what about if it's an opportunity for another specialized magnet program? I just would like to see if we could pursue this with the opportunity for the board to write rules, so that we could then sort of structure it so that it's not a carte blanche, but that we could have with some concern for the actual residents of the district who've lived there for 20 years and hope to be able to transfer from one school or another. If we could write rules about this, I'd feel a lot more comfortable, given that there's so many permutations to it.
You have a response, Ben or Angie?
I was just going to point out that the compact that we already have between the 50 states already guarantees students spots in the gifted programs and all that. If they were in those in their prior state, they're guaranteed a spot in those programs when they come to the state.
And that was just, if I can call it, that's
Yeah,
just-
follow it.
That was just
Well,
an example.
Example. I meant other kinds of programs that maybe are not identified in the compact, or that are unique to Utah, or situations like that. Because and it could be, we could find out, because I had the same question Jenny did. Are we talking about 5 kids statewide? Or are we talking about 505? And if it turns out there's 5, we can always figure it out. But if there is a significant number, I think that it makes a bigger difference. And I think everybody appreciates the contribution that military families make, but there's also some concern for people who've lived for generations in a neighborhood and have a certain expectation. So.
Member Straight?
Yes, thank you. Would this have any implications for the Utah High School Activities Association and their activities?
Ben?
So that's not covered by our compact on military students. So I don't think this would have any implications for the High School Activities Association.
Okay. Was that your fourth? That's the fourth. I'm not tracking over here. I'm tracking on this.
Yes, that is the fourth. And Chair, may I just make 2 comments quickly?
Yes.
Number one, I think that just from a number of years ago, when I was tracking the High School Activities Association eligibility requirements for students, their eligibility starts based on when they first enroll in a secondary or compete in a secondary sport in Utah. So if they're coming from out of state and the first school they end up in is like a different district, then that's where their eligibility starts. But then if they wanted to switch back to their boundary school, then they might have problems, But and then the second thing I was just going to mention, Board Member Lear, is I think you raise a really great point of, let's maybe take a look at board rule, see what we could do in board rule short of not doing the legislation. I guess the question is whether the board wants to support the bill file being open to start the conversation. But Ben and I will commit to taking a look at our rule, because we do have an open enrollment rule, and to see if there's something we could do there short of legislation.
Okay. Any other questions on the proposed 4 items? Board Member Hanson?
One point, our staff said they could just bring this back next month with maybe some answers to questions and maybe a little bit more direction. I'm all for, and I want to go on the record as all for supporting military families. I just think that we have certain areas that could be just overwhelmed. And we need to figure out how to deal with that if we're going to go in and put this into code. So that would be my request, if that's possible. And I don't know, do I need to make a motion to do that, to pull this one out and bring it back next month?
Or you just don't do anything.
You can make a motion to act on 1, 2, 3, and you get a second, then it goes on the table.
Okay, I will do that. I'll move that we authorize staff to act on items 1, 2, and 3 for the legislative requests, and to bring item number 4 back to us next month.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Do you want to speak more to the motion? Seeing none, a discussion to the motion? Vice Chair Belknap? Oh, sorry. Member Booth?
Did you want to speak?
Did you want to speak to it? Okay, we have a motion on the table. The motion is to direct staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to Utah Code as proposed in items 1, 2, and 3, and bring item number 4 back. Call that to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Vice Chair Belknap?
Yes, I have another motion for a statutory changes, and this, I won't go into that. Okay, my motion is that the board requests staff to seek legislation related to issues raised in the legislative audit, a performance audit of Utah charter schools governance structure, including establishing a renewal process for charter schools in Utah in order to implement a best practice currently in place in other states. I actually changed the last words.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Vice Chair Davis, do you want to speak to your motion?
Oh, me, yeah.
Vice Chair
Yes,
Belknap?
yes, I do. This has been some conversation. First of all, we have the legislative audit and then the charter leadership, and it's also been having discussions, and then this is something that we really agreed upon from this charter school governing audit structure, that we need some sort of renewal process for our charters because in our state, when they first started, they were in perpetuity. They don't have to change their charters at all. This way, it would just be a renewal process. And then there's a couple of other pieces in that audit as well that you can look at. Oh,
So I don't have to read it?
yeah.
Oh, after my head. So the motion before is there discussion to the motion? Member Moss?
So, question, Vice Chair. You say the charter board leadership is in support. Have they taken a vote in support of this at their meeting? I know that, of course, a year or so back, we changed things in Bill 242 to have a preliminary, I can't remember what we ended up calling it, trial period, right? And so that changed the evergreen status for the first time, where you had a 3-year initial period before full approval. So I just haven't heard this discussion. Is this something they've taken a formal position supporting?
Can you respond?
Thank you. They actually, I don't know if they did it in their last meeting, but they were going to bring it to them, but they do want us to do something and to come united to the table, and they will come to the table on this, okay? Angie, sorry, Chair.
Okay. Did you have a follow-up? Okay. No,
Chair.
you're good. Member Earl? Oh, hang on. Angie, did you have a comment?
Yes, if you don't mind, thank you. I just wanted to show you, specifically related to your question, Board Member Moss, the State Charter School Board's response to the audit actually states that one of their recommendations, or that they support, you can see it right there, that's from the State Charter School Board's response to the audit. It's that second bullet. The State Charter School Board strongly supports a renewal process for charter schools in Utah in order to implement a best practice currently in place in every other state. So the including portion of the motion that Board Member Belknap just stated actually came from the State Charter School Board's response in their audit.
Okay. Member Earl?
So the renewal process, I'm just trying to think this through, would be every 5 years? They would decide who would decide?
To be determined.
To be determined.
It's to
Okay.
start it.
And that, I'm just trying to think through this. So it gives them the opportunity to change their initial charter and direction? Is that what the intent is?
You want to respond? Vice
It
Chair Belknap?
it could. It would also help them with requirements of statute and of board rule and other things to make sure that their application and the agreement with their authorizer are up to date.
Okay. I'm just trying to think through it, but I can do that offline.
Okay.
So,
So this is to get things started. Once you get something started, then you're in the queue early to get the water to the end of the row by that last day of the session. I'm not seeing it. Oh, Member Hymas?
Just a quick thought, maybe, is this, the purpose of this, is this to make sure that charter schools are performing well? Like, is this a performance issue? Is this just what's the point of this? If I could ask, we don't do this for other public schools, traditional public schools, we wouldn't.
This is, you want to respond? Vice Chair Belknap?
This actually, Board Member Hymas, this goes back to the legislative audit, and they've asked us to do something. And this is something that we can do in agreement. There wasn't necessarily why you needed to do that, but we need to do that we need to have reviews. So that, it came from the audit, and so we're just trying to do what we've been asked to do. Angie, sorry.
Angie?
No, thank you. I just was going to show you the audit that's linked, and it will be in this document either as something that was considered or something that you support today as part of the board policy request. But if you look in the audit that's linked here, it was one of the recommendations of the legislative auditors to, you can see it's that third and bullet there, consider adding a formal renewal requirement to state statute for charter schools to renew agreements with their authorizers. And so just wanted to give you that context. There's more information in the audit about what other states do and how I believe Utah is the only state that doesn't have a process like this, where they're requiring those charter schools who've been approved to renew and review their agreements periodically.
With the authorizer.
With the authorizer, yes,
Yeah,
not with the
us,
state
but
board.
with the authorizer. Oh. Did you have a follow-up?
No, I appreciate the clarification.
Okay. Member Earl?
so I'm thinking again, but the accreditation, they have to do that as well, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm just thinking of processes and when we talk about simplifying things, I'm trying to understand, once again, just thinking out loud, trying to make sure I understand all the directions here. So maybe I'll go read the audit. So thank you.
So the way this motion is put together, it is to start the process, and it will be a revisit to the audit. A lot of entities will play a role in it as legislation is written or modified. But this is how we openly start the process. We just don't, I don't start at, leadership and Angie doesn't just hear about it and say, okay, hey, legislator, let's do that. We do it in an open meeting, and then we know as a body that we have staff working on these particular items, and we like to start early. So, Member Hutchings.
Just a quick comment. I've read the audit and I understand the reason why we have this motion. I just wish it wasn't a surprise right now. And I wish we'd had an opportunity as a board to at least review the audit together to understand the need for this together. Because I'm not sure that board members,
Yeah.
maybe it was when I wasn't here. But I mean, and I have seen it, but it feels like it's a surprise to many of us.
Member Hymas?
Yeah, thank you. I don't mind charters reaching out with their authorizers and connecting with them. That's fine. What I do have concern about, and
is I don't want this to become a venue or an avenue for a group of people to say, we don't like what this charter's doing, we're going to close them down, right? That's where we need to protect, that, in my opinion, that's where parents and community, if they are in line, if they enjoy what the charter is doing, then that continues to go on. If they do need to check with an authorizer, similar to it slipped my mind, but when no, not AISU, but accreditation, thank you. Similar to something like that. I don't mind checks and balances, is what I'm saying. What I do mind is when somebody gets a bee in their bonnet and says, I don't like what's happening, we're going to shut this down, right? That's not appropriate.
But that still circles back to the authorizer. The
Right.
authorizer's one that keeps it open. Also, it's not. So that's, Member Moss.
I'll just say, this is a surprise to me too. This is a very significant change to Utah charter practice, of course. It's something we discussed on the charter board. It's been out there, but I wasn't aware there was a motion. So personally, I'm opposed to voting on it now unless it was perhaps modified to suggest that it will explore a renewal process. This seems to suggest that the decision is to support establishing a renewal process. And I haven't, for my part, having come from that charter board, I haven't heard exactly what their position is, either from the charter board or the charter associations. So I'm reluctant to vote on this on 5 minutes' notice to establish that big of a change. Perhaps I could propose an amendment. That be in order?
No, you can make an amendment.
Yeah, well, I'll propose an amendment that it would say, including exploring a renewal process for charter schools in Utah in order to implement a best practice currently in place in other states.
Again?
It's change establishing to exploring. Can I speak to the motion, to the amendment?
To include exploring.
Yeah, that's it. It would just be, and I don't even know if, considering exploring, the point is I'm reluctant to vote in favor of establishing a renewal process for something that I've not had a chance to discuss with the charter community. And I think there are several of us that are involved in the charter community that find this a surprise, pretty significant action. So if the idea is to begin the discussion and explore that possibility, this amendment would allow us to engage in that discussion and hear from the charter community and decide what action we actually want to recommend in legislation.
Well, you're speaking to the motion, but to
Sorry.
your amendment.
Yes.
Let's get a second, so we can follow process here. Second. Want to finish speaking to the motion? To amend.
No, I
Anything
think
more you wanna say?
that covers my concerns and the need, I think, for some discussion before we take a definitive position on establishing a renewal process.
Okay. So the amendment is that the board requests staff seek legislative related, let's say, right in here. To the original motion, it's adding, including exploring a renewal. Already in there. The new words to the motion would be just not adding exploring, it's more than that, correct?
Replace.
Exploring
Just including
and
exploring,
taking out establishment.
taking out establishment, thank you. Okay, is that right? Is that how you want it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
So from the original motion, we're taking out establishing and inserting, the amendment is to take out establishing and insert exploring. Any discussion to that amendment? Vice Chair Davis?
Yeah, just a question, Chair, and maybe it would come back here, but, so in the code, it would say that we would explore an idea.
No.
Is that,
No.
can you help
No.
clarify? Yeah.
Yeah, can I respond, Chair? Here, I think, I mean, the initial preface to the motion is to seek legislation related to issues. That suggests that there will be discussion about the issues raised in the audit, and that we will pursue legislation. When you turn, though, to the second part of a renewal process, the original motion says that we support establishing a renewal process. What I'm trying to do is align that specific element with the more general idea that we're going to seek legislation related to these issues. I don't think we've had a chance to discuss the specifics of a renewal process or to decide yay or nay. So if there's better language to that, I'm seeking to avoid a definitive statement that we support a renewal process for charters when it's not yet been discussed, and to put it instead in the more general kind of injunction, I guess, that we're providing in the first part of the motion, which is to do something to respond to the audit. And if that's a renewal process, great, but I think we need to hear from the charter community first.
Okay, Vice Chair Belknap? We have it, speaking to the amendment?
Yes, I won't be voting for this because I don't believe that we should go to legislators and ask them to explore something. And so I'm going to speak against it, but I also think that when we're talking about a renewal process, we're not talking about literally checking off this box, this box. In the audit, it talks about renewing X number times a year, and that X hasn't been established. It's not what your qualifications are. It's that there will be a renewal process, and the authorizers establish the process. So I won't be voting for the exploration of.
Okay. We have an amendment to the motion to remove the word, oh, hang on. You're speaking more to the motion, or to the amendment?
Last comment to the amendment?
Okay.
Sorry. I guess if there's a better word there, fine. It seems like we're seeking generally legislation in the first part. And that's not specified except when it comes to charter renewal. And so that's the one area that the motion proposes very specific action, which is a significant change. Elsewhere, it just says we're going to seek something related to the audit. And if that's the general approach, I would fully support it. But when we come to very specific and significant action in establishing a renewal process, that's much more definitive as to that one piece of the audit.
Put a period after structure.
Great.
But you'd have to
I would accept that amendment.
No, I can't amend it.
Okay.
No,
Can I?
hang on. You can, we have an amendment.
We'd have to vote that down.
No, she can, no, I get one more amendment on here. You get one more, and Vice Chair Davis is going to probably amend this amendment
I'd like to amend the amendment.
to, okay,
I'd like to amend the amendment to,
remember, we're
And-
adding or taking away, so we're going to take out
to take out
everything
everything after
to,
structure
okay, got it.
and put a period instead
Thank
of a
you.
comma.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So we have a second. Do you want to speak to your proposed amendment to the amendment?
It just, from listening to all the comments here, it sounds like that's a good, sort of middle ground from the opinions that have been expressed. And honestly, we've got time before the legislative session starts. And if someone wants to bring this back and make it more specific again and say, oh, we've talked with the state charter school board or other authorizers and this really is sound, let's change it to establish, then certainly we can go ahead and do that.
Okay. Any discussion to the amendment to the amendment? Member Straight?
Yes, I'll be supporting that. It puts us at the table, and it puts us in a position to influence the decision, all of us.
Okay, Member Lear?
And I'm okay with that also, but I'm just, something that was said kind of rankled me about the charter community. This is public education money, public education schools for all children. And I would not necessarily be controlled by what the charter community thinks about this. I'm glad for their opinions, but I think it is a more united public education discussion. So I'd like to know from other people who have not had positive experiences with charter schools or who believe that the charter board governance is in need of reform. So I'm just pointing out that I think this is not something in the ownership of the charter community.
Okay. Member Earl?
My concern still comes back to more stuff for schools to do. I want us to be careful that we're just not adding more things on as we're moving forward. And I guess getting it more accurate information is important, but adding another process to something that maybe didn't really need a process, I hope we're just cautious with that.
Member Hanson?
Yeah, I'll be in support of this amendment. I think we've got an audit. There were items found. There were responses to the audit. The charter school board evidently responded and said, hey, we're in favor of this. But I think that this strikes a good balance. You know, we ought to respond to the audit. There needs to be legislation to make that happen. So we should look at the audit, figure out what makes sense, and codify that. So I think this is a good balance.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments, so we're going to vote on the proposed amendment to the amendment, which basically states that the board requests staff seek legislation related to issues raised in the legislative audit, a performance audit of Utah's charter school governance structure, period. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So the motion before the board, as amended, we're going to vote on this, that the board requests staff to seek legislation related to the issue raised in the legislative audit, a performance audit of Utah's charter school governance structure, period. Not seeing any other comments or questions, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Okay, moving right along. Thank you. I believe that covers everything, kind of. No, it doesn't. Let me see where we're at.
Chair, we still have.
I'm really wanting to move off this page that we've been on forever. Let's see, request for statutory changes.
We have 6 more, or 7.
What's that? What else is there?
7 more. They were chunked into 2 sections. I
Oh, okay.
apologize. So there's still 5
Next is
through
a
11.
policy request. All right.
Still policy
Okay,
requests.
thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So may I move forward?
Yes, please.
So this is something we haven't done in the past, but and I'll tell you why we're doing it this way. Generally, I only share with you policy requests that are policy requests only, meaning they're only going to be bills. They don't have funding requests related to them. Last year, we've had a little bit of confusion where staff went through the business case and funding request process, and then later on, we realized there was a bill that also needed to be opened related to that funding request. So this year, because you're going to be looking at business requests or funding requests either later today or tomorrow afternoon, we wanted to add to the list those funding requests that have policy requests associated with them. And so you can see when you see the highlighted, for example, the first one is eliminate curricular fees business case. You can click on there, it'll bring you to the business case, which will describe the policy request as well as the request for funding associated with it. So items 5 through 11 are all policy requests tied to a funding request that you'll be discussing in even more detail either later today or tomorrow afternoon. So I'm going to briefly, if you don't mind, Chair Huntsman, I will talk about 5 and 7 quickly, and then Jeff will be discussing the other 2. So the first one, eliminate curricular fees, business case.
Hey, before we dive into that really quick, I'm trying to track our actionable. Is this actionable?
Yes, because what we would be
just-
doing then is asking legislators to open bill files on these because they're not just funding requests, but they also will need statutory language.
Okay, it meets the criteria. Thank you. Okay, please continue.
So these are policy requests. They just also are related to funding requests.
Okay.
So the first one would be to amend 53G 7503 to essentially prohibit LEAs from charging curricular fees if funding is provided by the legislature to offset the cost of curricular fees. You'll see in the business case that it is requesting approximately $50 million of ongoing funds to offset the cost of curricular fees. That amount was generated based on a report that our staff, received from LEAs this year, where we collected the amount of curricular fees, co-curricular and extracurricular fees that LEAs charged this last year. So that's number 5. And I'll go ahead and, if you don't mind, Chair, I'll discuss number 7. Number 7, maintenance of operations business case. This would, currently in statute, there's a section of code that, along with the 2% approximately of the WPU and enrollment growth that are included in the base budget, there are about 4 or 5 programs that also receive automatic increases to those line items. I believe one's transportation, another one I believe is NES, enhancement for at-risk students was in there. So what this business case would do is it would, the policy change would be to add 10 more programs to that list of programs that would be automatically increased each year based on either inflation or based on student enrollment growth. I think another one was concurrent enrollment that's already in code, for example. And there's the 10 programs listed there. So if that funding request is funded, we'd also need a statute change to add those 10 programs to the code. So those, I'll just end with those 2 and then turn the time to Jeff if you'd like.
Okay, Jeff? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, Mike. Sorry. My bad.
There we go. I'm actually going to skip number 6 because that is part of number 7 now, so we don't need number 6. It's one of the automatic increasers. Number 8 is economies of scale business cases. You may recall when doing your research for business cases, we're looking at our rural schools that, or LEAs that are in counties of the 4th, 5th, and 6th class getting a different pot of funding in lieu of NES. So this would be the code piece to that. If you pass that request, we would then amend the code to have those LEAs get that funding rather than the NES funding. Number 9 is expanding Acadians through grade 8. So that would be changing the code to say grade 8 instead of grade 6. Number 10 would be the full-day kindergarten business case. So this would be amending the 2 pieces of code related to how that funding request would be achieved. The first one is related to the current code around the all-day K, the optional, the OEK, which I think it's still called OEK. Okay, I always forget which acronym stuck with us from last session. That would be phasing that piece of code out if you fund all-day K, because obviously you wouldn't need that code anymore because the funding would become part of the WPU. And thus, the second piece of code would be amending the WPU code so that that would be part of the WPU funding would be providing that. So shifting that code around to fit that funding request. And the last one is the school readiness grant business case. This would be taking 2 pieces of code that's actually in Department of Workforce Services code. It's not the education code. That's where that code is, and the funding kind of funnels through there and us. But adding to the definition of an eligible student, where that funding is allowed to be spent on, a student who is a youth in foster care. Just adding that to the list in the definition that already exists for eligible student. And then also requiring that these those who receive this grant use the core standards for preschool that is set by the board rather than having it more open-ended. And that way you would have a little more say in how the structure of these programs are provided.
Chair?
Angie?
One thing I just wanted to supplement, number 6 is actually a separate business case. It's an amount above and beyond the maintenance of operations. So Jeff is correct. You saw that in the number 7, you'll see DLI, dual language immersion, is included in that list in number 7. But actually, number 6 is a business case for funding above and beyond what would be kind of that basic inflationary amount. So there is a separate business case just for DLI.
I have a quick question or comment. Vice Chair Davis?
Yes, I move to postpone the vote on these issues to the end of the study session action Friday session. Yes, and I'd like to speak to the motion. Yes, and
Can you
our
speak to the motion?
parliamentarian expert extraordinaire can tell me if that's the right thing to do, is to postpone to
You
that
can.
session,
If you-
so.
If you postpone, and you can put a time on it and a condition, so
Yeah,
yes.
we've just been visiting here saying it's a little difficult for us to vote on changes to the legislation when we haven't had the opportunity yet, which I think is coming this afternoon, to explore these issues financially and then make some voting tomorrow and kind of see where we all land. I mean, we could vote for this hypothetically right now and say hypothetically if everyone, but it might be easier to postpone it till tomorrow.
As a chair that accepted the motion, and I can restate the motion, so the intent of the motion, so managing everyone's expectations is all of this will come back tomorrow with our business cases. And as we work on our business cases, we can also, within those motions, address these line items of statute, of what we would propose to request a change in statutes. So that is how that's to manage the expectations of this motion. That's how I see it will play out. Okay, so we have a motion to postpone until tomorrow with a second. Any discussion to the motion, Board Member Lear?
No, I had a completely different question that
Okay,
somehow I got behind Cindy.
all right, we're fine. Not seeing any discussion, so the motion before the board is this section, these items, including, is this to include items 1 and 2 of the board approved request for statutory changes? Let's just want to make sure I'm clear. So it's items that's on this list,
5 through 11.
1,
5 through 11.
5 to 11, and then also, are you wanting that also, or just limit it to 5 through 11? So just 5 to 11?
Yes.
Okay, so there's still two more, there's still another item, so you still have more to present.
No, that's it.
Is that it?
I'm sorry, Chair, may I say something?
Is it? Yes, if you would.
Those others are all previously approved requests.
And
So
you're
when-
just going to report on them?
I wasn't going to, I'm just tracking them. I just keep them on the list so you know what you approved.
Okay, so there
and
isn't anything, okay.
There's
I just
nothing
wanna make sure.
beyond. Yep.
All right,
11
we're
is the
good.
last. Yep.
All right. So the motion before the board is that we postpone these items 5 through 11 until tomorrow's meeting, which will still stay actionable. Good? Any discussion to that? And to the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Board Member Lear.
And now I realize I could have asked this question during discussion, I guess. I just wanted a clarification from Jeff about the number, and I think it was, I don't even remember what number it was. It had to do with economies of scale for rural districts, swapping that out for NES. Is that what you were? And I'm just wondering, what's the impetus for that? Is there kind of a bad connotation to NES, or, anyway?
Chair, is it all right if I answer?
Yes, please.
So it's related to the funding study that we've been doing. There were recommendations that talked about the impact on LEAs due to their economies of scale. And in the business case, it does state that the amount that's being requested or recommended would be more than the amount that's currently appropriated for NES. So the idea would be like what we did with EARS, the enhancement for at-risk student. We changed it to an add-on for at-risk students. The intent would be to make sure that that pot of money is larger than the NES amount so that LEAs who are currently, or schools that are receiving NES funds would get at least that amount and hold them harmless. So that detail is included in the business case of the intent would be to replace the program, but not to harm any currently receiving NES schools or LEAs.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. The other big question is because of time management and a few other things, our item number 11 is also on our agenda tomorrow. It isn't actionable. And we are a couple hours behind schedule right now. So what I'm opting to do is move off of this, and we'll see how the rest of our day goes, and if it goes by really quick and we catch up, we can bring back that informational item to get into those discussions. All right, very good point. We're going to invite Dale Frost and Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones up. We're not going to get down into the business cases themselves, but this will help prepare us for tomorrow. So Dale, come on up. So we're going to, if you'll give us a preview of what to expect tomorrow, introduce, okay, we've got the cases. This is where we're at. We'll do a very high level preview of it without diving down into the business cases. And I think it will help us be very good. Thank you, Vice Chair Davis, for saying, let's just prepare because you're prepared to help us prepare, so thank you.
So where are we on the agenda?
We're actually on lunch, which might be dinner, but we're on item 11. The discussion of legislative session business cases and funding priorities. And short of getting into all of those, let's get another quick high level of what's going to be before us. Dale?
Sorry, Dale.
Chair, thank you. Dale Frost, Fiscal Policy Analyst. I think Deputy Superintendent Jones was going to quickly introduce this. Is that correct? Deputy Superintendent Jones?
Yeah, Chair Huntsman, this is Scott, so Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. I understand there's the time constraint going on here. We will keep this really short. We just want to emphasize that it's this time of year, it's this meeting that, we, following the meeting, we meet the law, which the law prescribes that we make our proposals to the governor's office in accordance with the Budgetary Procedures Act. And then I would just add one more piece to this too, in line with Board Member Davis's motion. So tomorrow, when you take the actions on these, I would recommend that, for those statutory changes, that those statutory changes get approved should you, the board, decide to, push that particular business case forward. I think that's what she was getting at there too. So with that, I'll save most of my comments for tomorrow and let's just go right to Dale so we can orient the board members to the tracker and then give the opportunity for just, some additional review tonight if the board members see it can fit it into their schedule ahead of the study session tomorrow. So thank you, Chair, and thank you, board members.
Chair, if I may continue?
Yes, Dale.
Thank you. So I wanted to point out just a couple things. Again, thank you for your patience with the many materials flying your way. I'm wearing two hats at this time, and and I was trying my very best to get materials to you. I wanted to highlight a couple things, a couple errors, just so that we're all on the same page. So in those RFA charts, we're calling them that because they're no longer a 4-quadrant chart. They have 6 quadrants. And RFA stands for Request for Appropriations. So on the Adobe Create Utah, there's clearly an error on the amount. It's $1,830,500. That's the request, so wanted to clarify that. And then I failed to attach an excellent write-up on the BTS statewide expansion, a write-up supporting the business case and from Member Booth and Member Lear. And that we did change, and so if you look in the board backups, that is the only document that was updated today, and you'll see that it has today's date. So, and I apologize for that. That was not intentional, and we now have that fixed. So we have the tracker in 2 different forms for you all. This is the main form of the tracker, which is really the focus on the summaries. So you can get to the, but I wanted to show you just a couple things. One, over here you see these first 3 statutory requirement. So if you remember a couple months ago, I presented and said, because of Constitutional Amendment G, House Bill 357, there are some automatic increases that go into the base budget. And so we wanted to articulate that, and you'll see in the next slide, try to quantify that. We don't have final numbers, but so you can kind of get an idea of what's already on autopilot. And then we also, I believe this morning you talked, you received the USDB funding requests. We have those there. And then below, these are, everything below that says USBE request, these are the items for which you have a business case. So that super long list of everything, it's these that say USBE request. And the way they're organized, we were asked by, I believe, leadership, it was the superintendency asked the superintendency to look at the business cases and provide their estimates of priorities, and this not just internal, but external as well. And the superintendency spent a lot of time looking across this and having a lot of conversation, and we organized this. The top 10 are there for your review. You'll see it starts with the WPU value increase, and then the next 2.5 pages are the superintendency's priorities for your review. And then every other business case, because there are very many important requests that didn't make it into the top 10, are organized alphabetically. And we tried to organize what's on Civic Clerk in that same manner. I hope that makes sense. So the first 10 are not in alphabetical order. The remaining 17, I think, are in alphabetical order. Then the last thing I wanted to show you on this, so there are 3 columns here. The first one here says advances the USBE strategic plan. This was, well, all 3 of these columns were tricky. But if there was a clear strategy or metric, that was fairly easy to say yes. But there were others that clearly advanced the board's mission or the board's vision of a portrait of a graduate that aren't connected to a strategy. And so if you have specific questions about that, I know Tiffany Stanley, Chief of Staff, can answer those. And then maintains funding and expands funding. These were also tricky. You would think that that's fairly straightforward. But if you have something in statute that shows for an expansion of the program and we're just funding that, we actually put that in the maintains because it's not really growing the intent of the program. But then there are others that expand beyond that, which we did say expands. And so if you have specific questions. And then in the notes, you'll see 2 things, whether there's something, whether business case aligns with the JLC priority, the Joint Legislative Committee. You'll see that. And then I believe when we have a specific goal or strategy that aligns or is advanced by a specific business case, you'll see that in that notes column. Any questions on this part of the tracker? I hope that just helps you to orient yourself because there's a lot of information I'm trying to show succinctly.
Just still looking.
Still staring. Board Member Lear.
I'm a little confused if this is a time for a question or a motion or a request. So this is bad timing, tell me. I'm looking at, and they're not numbered on my, the list I'm looking on either. I'm looking at the one that says critical USB FTE needs. And I would like that to be, I couldn't believe I had my glasses on.
So this is on our agenda, if this is informational, we were going to discuss, get clarity. Tomorrow on all of these items, we're going to have all of our action.
Okay, so can I still ask something specific
You can ask
to that?
questions and that,
May
but
I
we were,
still ask
we were
something
hoping,
specific?
our hope was to do an overview to get you familiar with this, and not dive into a whole bunch of business cases because of our time.
This is not a deep
but
dive
go
level
ahead.
question.
So, go ahead.
I would just like those, when we discuss them tomorrow, I would like those broken out so that we can vote separately on those increases, not have to vote on them as a wholesale yes or no. I'm talking, mine doesn't have a number on it. I'm talking about the one that says critical USB FTE needs.
So that's number 3 that happens to have a bunch of those, so you
Right,
could do a
and
motion to
that's-
do all of 3, or you
Yours
could do a
shows,
portion of it.
I don't know what maybe I'm not looking, maybe I didn't. I just wanted to, no, I want it broken out the way it is there so that I don't vote on number 3. I vote on every piece of number
You
3.
can do that in your motion.
Right now or tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Great,
And then if motion 3 is on the table, you can divide.
okay. I just wanted to make
Well,
sure maybe if there's any need for staff preparation for that, then they would be forewarned. Thank you.
And Chair, if I might, luckily there's not, because if you look at the RFA charts, we have this overall slide, but you can see that each individual request is broken out after that. So that may be a way to look at it. So the amounts and the reasonings for each individual one.
But Member Lear, when you're making your motion, and we'll understand your intent, I think we can get exactly where you want to be.
And I only have a couple more things. I'll try to be brief. If you want to get a sense of the numbers, because there are numbers attached to each of these, we created a different version of the tracker that just shows the numbers. And to kind of give you an idea here, those statutory increases were about 138 million. Those 27 business cases that you have in front of you total a little over 600 million. And the superintendency priorities are about 315 million. But the other information is all the same here on that piece. I did want to point out one thing for you all. And actually, I'll go down here. This came up when the governor's office reached out to me because they were looking at the business cases that you're looking at here. And the general question from Jacob Wright from the governor's office, which was a great question, which is how do the business cases affect each other? Because we don't have a coherent budget. We don't have to pass a specific budget. And if they were contingent on one another, it can get complicated very, very fast. So each one of these are independent, but you should be aware of that because some of them certainly do impact the other ones. And so what I tried to do here was kind of highlight for you, and this was this morning, so we didn't have a chance to post it. But there are different pieces and parts of the minimum school program, which is the biggest, pot of money that goes to schools. There's the basic school program that is WPU based, and that's in this kind of green color. And then another part is called the related to basic. And Deputy Superintendent Stallings already talked about the maintenance of operations case, that there are certain programs within the related basic program that already get these automatic increases, but the majority of them don't. And so I wanted to point out one, just as an example here. So pupil transportation is one of the programs that do get the automatic increases. So if you see down here, you'll see that what is part of the basic school program, I've highlighted in that same green. What is likely or is part of the related to basic program, because some of these would be new programs, are in that kind of orangish, reddish color. And some of them are complicated, because take example, the full day K. At first, that adds money into the related to basic program, but then replaces it and puts the full day K weight in the basic school program. So you see that's why in year 3, that's green on the right-hand side. So what that means is that OEK doesn't get automatic increases, but full day K at year 3 would, unless you have a maintenance of operations case. The main reason why I wanted to show you this is because a couple of these pieces, so NES is part of the basic school program. And so just that WPU value increase will give more to NES than that 500,000. If you want to prioritize the 500,000 as well, that would be in addition to what the WPU value increase would give to NES. Same thing with transportation. Transportation needs about $5 million right now to get to about that 85% legislative funding level. If it received a 7.5% increase, if both of those WPU value increases occurs, then it will actually be above the 85%. And then if you added the 5 million, that would go above that. I just wanted us to be clear that these are independent, and you would just have to, and cumulative, so that they would add on top of one another. I don't know if that's helpful for you all as you're trying to figure out your priorities, because it's not clear if you just read the business cases about this piece. So that's all. Go ahead.
One of the challenges, though, as we're acting tomorrow, these are the what ifs. If you do this, then here's a second, third level effect. That our hope would be that you would remind us of those second and third level effects that happen as we're acting on one, and because sometimes it's assumed that we know it all, or we should know it all. But that help and guidance, just that extra help us with our situational awareness when we have something on the table that it does have an effect without being asked. I'm hoping you could share that.
And I will do my very best to do that. That's why, and I can share this document with you, any of those programs that are highlighted may be impacted by the general programmatic increases, whether it's enrollment growth or WPU. And depending on whether policymakers, including you, advance this maintenance of operations, that would be broader or narrower, the impact. But the other programs that are outside of these are not really impacted by the WPU value increase at all. And so, but yeah, I will do my best, but I just thought that might be helpful information as you sort through the difficult task of prioritizing any of these important requests. That's all that I thought I would cover today. And we'd be happy to answer questions or do it next week, Chair.
Okay. Member Booth?
Or tomorrow.
May I just point out, since the white paper that Board Member Lear and I submitted wasn't put on there until today, that as you look at this listing here, the amount that is listed there in the current business case of 4.4 million is not the correct figure if we were to consider what we're proposing. And I've given you a ballpark figure in the white paper, which is the figure that would be required this year if we were doing it 5 years from now, going in the gradually expanding program that has been proposed in there. And in reality, it is less than that. We have all of those figures broken it down now with new, with the proposal that we've come up with. I don't know whether those figures, we want to share them tomorrow afternoon when we're having that discussion, or if you'd like them to be sent to you in advance so that you're looking at the total proposal that we're suggesting with our white paper.
So do we have them, Dale? You have them in hand?
Well, I was just, is it the 17 million, Member Booth?
17 million was the figure that we were basing it on, your projection of what would have to be increased over if it were over a 5-year period. But if we're doing it this year, it's a 12.7 million.
Okay.
And Kathy has the breakdown of everything that's in the current business case. It's now been redone with the new figures.
So,
That's me.
Oh.
I accidentally did
so,
We can make sure that they have, you have that information, so you have both options going forward tomorrow. So yeah, we can make sure you have that information, get that out. Sorry, I didn't have that at this morning, so we can do that.
well, and we have deadlines too, what goes in our packets, but we will have it available tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, we can make sure it's available and generally distribute to all
Okay,
your,
good.
the members.
We've had it for several days. I think we could have made, muddy the water with things that hadn't even been brought to the table yet, so
Okay.
prepared when you're ready.
Tomorrow will be a big day, so we've got to be prepared. And then at that time, and people will be, I'm sure they'll be advocating for programs and business cases, and we'll just make it happen until we're done. Okay, Vice Chair Belknap?
Yeah, Dell, can you send that sheet that you had the pink and the green on so we can compare the ramifications of overlap here? And I don't know that that's the right words, but you know what I mean. Thanks.
Okay, Member Earl?
I would like the white paper tonight.
It's there now.
Oh, it is? Where is it located?
It's listed in
Okay.
the
Okay,
original.
never mind.
Member Lear?
I have another question that I've been just wrestling with for a couple of weeks that maybe you can help me. I feel like I'm looking at these numbers in a vacuum. Nobody's told me that it's only valuable or meaningful to prioritize 15 things or a total of X amount of money. And so, and I know sometimes, and I think I've asked this question for 5 years, and maybe it's so far in between I can't remember the answer. But I can't prioritize things unless I have it in relationship to something. And if it's just a pipe dream for us to list 23 things, I'd like to know that. And I think Scott Jones had a weak moment where one time he said, "Don't waste your time after number 12." But that actually helped me. So that's, I don't, there's a
We
question.
can talk
buried
about
in it.
expectations, but we set our own expectations, and all while I've been chairing, I've been in meetings where the legislature said, this is your ceiling, which is an expectation, and we've chose to exceed it. So it's whatever we choose to do. Nobody's given us guidance on how many business cases and/or how much money we ask for, with the exception of when it's over with, they work off our highest priorities.
Or they
So
laugh.
They have laughed. I've been laughed at. I'm telling you.
And I'm, in all seriousness, it would be helpful for me to hear, based on the last 5 years, and I know this is a strange year, but based on the last 5 years, this is the total amount that has been funded, or this is a realistic amount within the last 5 years, given that we've got a lot of federal money. I just feel like otherwise we are just making a wish list.
You're absolutely correct. But we can kind of give a feel for where we've been in the past, and of course, they don't have the numbers yet to say where we're going, and so
Right.
then they adjust the sales according, or cut us back, and we've witnessed that from session to session. But again, this is driven because we want to obey the law and what's in statute, and we've got to get something to the governor. But just I might also note that we have changed our legislative ask all along the way once we realize there's enough money. It's just a starting point. But it'll be tough to balance, but we'll do our best.
Chair, could I add just a little bit of, it's a very good question, Member Lear, a very difficult question to answer because we don't have revenues and we really won't know what's available to spend until the budget is done, and then it's too late. And so how do we deal with that kind of chicken and egg kind of problem? The best I could say is what has happened over the last couple of years. You know, how much total new money so you can compare apples to apples. Last year, the total increase of public ed was just north of 400 million. And before COVID, it was greater than that. It was like 490 million. A lot of that got pulled back. So those were both banner years before they came out. And to kind of give you an idea, if the superintendency top 10 priorities plus the statutory requirements were funded in full, then we're talking about 450 million. So that would be essentially all that you could afford at that point. But at the same time, I don't want to say don't look at anything else but there are trade-offs. I don't know how much will be available this year. And you see the 762 million, which is a huge number. The majority of that 611 million is in a few requests, if you see down here. The WPU value increase, this $250 million for capital, you'll see right down here, and this eliminate curricular fees. 500 million of that is in those three cases. So, you know, those are things to consider, and how much to prioritize is a challenging issue. But hopefully that gives you at least some idea of where we've actually landed in the last couple of years.
Better than I was 15.
But she wants to be better in tomorrow.
And better tomorrow.
I'm not great with money anyway, so you know,
Well, you say that every year, Board Member Lear, but we still make good motions and
to attest to that with my husband.
so it is a tough process, and we'll roll our sleeves up and we'll get through it. And Dell, thank you for being patient with us, and thank you for this overview. And Scott, I keep looking, I don't see him. I have to look over my shoulder to see Scott. So thank you.